original disciples, John is now 60 plus years out from when Jesus lived. It's in the early 90s, like 93, 4, 5-ish, and before we moved into the 2nd century. And John is in fact, all of the other disciples had lost their life. They had their head cut off, executed, crucified, except for John. And so here he is. Now, he has been exiled to an island called Patmos. That was his punishment. And so he's there because of two things: religious and political persecution. And so he's exiled there, kind of out of sight, out of mind. And not killing him, they put him there. Which in that itself is a huge lesson, because in that place, it was there that John has this revelation, this unveiling, this revealing of God came to him and showed him in vivid detail, imagery, symbols, showed him the events that would lead up to the culmination of history in the world as we know it. And so it's an incredible book, and so this is John's, he records it. In fact, the angel tells him to write this down, and he does. And so, but there are at least 3 instances in this book that these verses that bear this resemblance. They're very, very similar. Now, well, let me say this first. Revelation, in large part, is a futuristic book, especially from Revelation 4 to the end. It's something that has not happened yet. It's in the future. Think of it as prophetic. But it's going to happen. Nevertheless, even though it hasn't happened yet, like are so many things, there are principles that we derive from the not yet that are very, very applicable, real, and relevant for life in the now. Okay? So that's what we're doing. We're taking a not yet truth and reeling it back into today, life as we know it here on planet Earth. And so I'm just going to read them one after the other. The first one is in Revelation 1, verse 9, and John is telling us, kind of introducing us to what's going on. And so this is what he says: I, John, your brother and companion in the, watch this, in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the Word of God and the testimony of Jesus. So that's why he's there. But I want you to notice that he says patient endurance that are ours in Jesus. Now later on in Revelation 13:10, when things are is upside down as you can, it's an unbelievable stuff that's taking place, bad stuff that's taking place. John writes these words: if anyone goes into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. Watch this. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. Okay? Third one. Revelation 14:12, the intensity, the fire's getting hotter, if you will. John writes again, this season, this time, calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints, there it is again, who obey God's commandments here and remain faithful to Jesus. Now, in a general sense, this is always true for Christ's followers. Each one of these admonitions, but there are different seasons that this in life, sometimes in our personal life, sometimes just in life in general, like events that are taking place, circumstances, situations that are taking place in the world. And so, whatever the case might be, John has given us a really, really good word, and that is patient endurance, he's telling them. Now, this is in the midst of incredible, in one sense, it's almost unimaginable suffering that is taking place. It's something to a level that was really unprecedented. And so, in the midst of that, John keeps echoing. In fact, he says at the very beginning, we are a companion in suffering and kingdom and patient endurance. Patient endurance that are ours in Jesus. Now, patient endurance doesn't mean sitting idly by. It doesn't mean that we retreat into our homes and spend whatever season it is just in deep Bible study, retreating away from all the suffering or whatever is taking place. But nevertheless, it's really a mindset. It's really a heart set. It's really a kind of a posture that he is calling us to live in. The psalmist says to fret not. So we're not to be, anxious and fretting and this inner turmoil. So think of it more in those terms, patient endurance, which is internal, that will manifest itself externally, and that itself will be a witness to those who are looking.
We're not just frantic and oh no, the sky's falling and all of those kinds of things, because he tells us in these verses. So I want to share with you something from a commentary that I reference a lot. It's called The Expositors, and it's just one of my favorites. And so I want to read you something that it says, reflecting on these verses. It says that John sees his plight as part of God's design and says that he is actually a partner with his audience, other Christians, in three main things. So, just going to hit them quickly. The first one, both share with Christ and with one another the sufferings or agony that comes, watch this, not in spite of, but because of their faithfulness to Christ as the only true Lord and God. So that's why they are suffering. A lot of people think that Christ followers takes you away from the sufferings of this life. And that's not true. It sometimes it puts us in the middle of the sufferings of in this life. And John understood that. And so he says that's the first thing. Number two, they also share with Christ in the kingdom. In other words, his power and his rule. In one sense, even though it's through suffering, they're living out his kingdom come, his will be done on earth, in them and through them. And yet, there is the not yet that will fully be realized for all of God's people. And then number three, the present hidden rule of Christ and his followers is manifested through their patient endurance. Now, watch this. As they look around their immediate distresses, okay, as they put full confidence in Jesus Christ, they share now in his royal dignity and power. Whether those distresses are manifested through imprisonment, ostracism, slander, economic discrimination, hostility, disruption of the churches by false prophets, the constant threat of death from mob violence or judicial action, believers are to realize that their present kingship with Christ and their faithful endurance. Such endurance produces conflict with the powers of this world, and it calls for long suffering, patient endurance as the mark of Christ's kingship in our life. Now, I didn't write these words, but you heard these descriptive terms that are used that were real and relevant and happening in real time when John wrote that. And they are real and relevant in this time in which we're living here in the country, the United States. Now, this has been true around the world in certain places more than other forever, in places where Christians are persecuted, and it's what is called the underground church, and their lives are threatened, and many people are literally killed because of their faith. We never thought we would experience that in our country, in America, the land of the free. But we are increasingly seeing it. Actually listening to comments, people saying these things on international news, that it just makes your hair stand up when you hear that and you think about it. What is that gonna? What are we gonna do in this? It calls for patient endurance, not knee-jerk, not reactionary, not take up arms, not hurt people, not do anything destructive like that. That's not what God's people do. But we patiently endure. We let the light of Christ, we let his powerful spirit in us, we let his powerful word that we have in front of us, we let those things guide us and lead us into what to say, into how to say it, as to when to say it, as to who to say it to. All of those things under the sovereign rule of God, not only in the world, but we call him and ask him to rule over our life. So the light of Christ shines in us and it shines through us. So yes, is there a lot of things that we're disappointed with? Of course. Are there many things going on in life to discourage us? You bet. But as the king's kids, you've heard it put like that, we rule with Christ here on earth. He is, and I just take such comfort in knowing that if a sparrow falls today, he doesn't miss it. That if all the hairs on our head are numbered, then you can bet he is fully aware of what's taking place in this life. And he is calling us as Christ followers to patient endurance through this time. Now, in fact, it may call for patient endurance until one of two things. One, we either go to him, or two, he comes back for us. So it may be open-ended patient endurance. I wish I could say, you know what, I wish in 2 years that maybe this wouldn't be as relevant a message. And I don't mean to be a doomsdayer here, But I'm just saying, I seek to be a realist because the Bible is real and life is real. And so in real time, I believe we're now entered into a season that no matter how long God allows the earth to abide, for his people, for those of us who are locked in with him, that it's going to call for patient endurance on our side from us. And slowly, God is going to use us to reach people, not in mass, but one by one. One friendship, one neighbor, one colleague at work, one family member. And when you multiply that by all of the Christians that are here, then you can see the addition to the kingdom that's going to take place. That's always been the way God did it. He didn't do things in mass. His general pattern is one by one. He did it. And he's going to continue to do it. Because, how you say, John, how do you know that? Well, I know that he's not willing for any to perish. And until he comes back, every opportunity is going to be given to people to turn to him. And so until that day, we cannot give up or let up because there's too much at stake. Eternity is at stake. People's forever is at stake. And people that we know and love. And so, patient endurance. Hold on to that. Let that be an encouragement for you today. It is to me, and I pray that it is for you. So, whether you're watching it live or later, I just say, God bless you. May he fill you with his Holy Spirit today. May his word come alive to you. May you find your place among the people